Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to be starting here in just a minute. There are many of you in attendance today, and I see that many attendees are pouring in right now to our webinar, so we'll just give it a few moments here. It's nice to see some familiar names. And my name is Justin Peter. I'm Director of Programs at Quest Nature Tour. I'm going to be hosting this webinar with Emma, and we'll just give it another 30 seconds or so. I'd like to make a shout out to all of you, really. I see a fellow Mr. Peter, Otto Peter, is in attendance. Hello, Otto. Hello, Andres.
Can you please tell me about the alert that just popped up on our screen?
Emma, if you're there, can you close that alert on your web, on your, yeah, thank you. Great, so we're a minute past noon now, and I think we'll get started here. I'm sure many attendees will still keep coming in here, but everyone is welcome. So once again, my name is Justin Peter, and I'm Director of Programs at Quest Nature Tours. And we're very pleased to partner with Ontario Nature, and specifically in this case, in our Ontario Nature Reserves virtual tours. And today's talk is, in fact, the third presentation in the series we've been presenting this fall. And we're particularly excited about this one because we'll be visiting the very deep south of Ontario. Of course, many of you have heard of Point Pelee. Many of you have been to Point Pelee for birding. Pelee Island, is about 20 kilometers offshore to the southwest. Also a great birding destination. I think many of you may know it because of the Pelee Island Winery. If you've ever had any wines from Pelee Island, raise your hand. Very enjoyable. And I think it has the distinction of being Canada's most southerly inhabited place. And so we're excited to be hearing from Emma today about this nature reserve. We're particularly pleased. In fact, we have a number of Pelee Island spring migration getaways next May, which are very popular with our travelers. And although most of the interest goes to the birds when you're talking about Pelee and Pelee Island or the wines, I think there's so much more to Pelee Island, and we're excited to hear about Ontario Nature's Stone Road Alvar Nature Reserve today. Our presenter is Emma Horrigan, and Emma is a Conservation Projects and Education Manager with Ontario Nature. And Emma manages the Citizen Science and Nature Guardians Youth Program and collaborative projects with agricultural and research partners. Emma completed her master's in Arctic ecology at the University of Toronto and her bachelor's degree in forest conservation. She's been involved in several citizen science research initiatives across Ontario, ranging from biochar to salamanders and turtle road mortality to agricultural pests. Emma has worked at the University of Toronto, Trent University, and a community-based research center in Alberta County. And besides her passion for ecology, Emma enjoys cross-country skiing, hiking, and birding. And Emma, are you there?
I am.
Excellent. And while Emma's coming up, you might have noticed that there is a question. You have your little console. Everyone has a little console at the one side of the screen. And if you have questions at all during the presentation or for Emma, you're free to and welcome to enter your questions there, and we will address your questions towards the end of the presentation. So there you are, Emma. Good to see you.
Here I am. Thank you.
And without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Emma.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Justin. And I'm really excited to be joining you all today, even though it is not in person and virtually, to talk about the prescribed burn project that Ontario Nature has been leading on our Stone Road Alvar Nature Reserve. And since we are unable to gather in person, I just wanted to begin with a land acknowledgement. acknowledging the land that I'm situated on at home here today in Toronto. This place is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples, and is the current territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit under Toronto Purchase Treaty Number 13, signed in 1805. Since the very beginning, Indigenous peoples have inhabited these lands, which are still home to diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We are grateful for the opportunity to gather on this territory, even though current circumstances only permit us to do so virtually, and to work and live in this community. We commit ourselves to the work of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. Through this land acknowledgement, our intent is to honor and show gratitude to those taking care of these lands for over thousands of years, and as a sign of our respect and willingness to learn and heal. So with that, I'll now lead into my presentation today, highlighting our work on Stone Road Alvar. And as Justin mentioned, I think when most people hear about Pelee Island or Stone Road Alvar, they think of the birds. And certainly it is a really special place to visit for all the wonderful birding opportunities. But what I hope to highlight through my presentation today is that there are really there's a lot of biodiversity beyond the birds found on Pelee Island, and they, in particular, our Stone Road Alvar Nature Reserve, and lots to celebrate and appreciate beyond the birds. Okay, so just a brief outline of what I'll be talking about today. First, I will give a brief background into Ontario Nature for those of you who aren't familiar with our organization and what we do. Then I will move into talking about what alvars are and the role that fire plays in terms of restoring grassland alvar ecosystems. From there, I'll talk specifically about our prescribed burn projects and what our main objectives have been, the key partners that we've worked with, and what our next steps are in terms for the long term. And finally, I'll finish my presentation with what I'm calling the Pelee Island Insider Quiz, which will be an opportunity for folks who have been to the island before to maybe test their knowledge a little bit, and for folks who haven't been before, hopefully it inspires you to take a trip to Pelee Island. So who is Ontario Nature? Ontario Nature's mission is to protect wild species and wild spaces through conservation, education, and engagement. And we work towards achieving this mission through a number of core programs. One of those is our Nature Reserves program. And through this program, we oversee 26 nature reserves and 3 conservation easements, which total 3,100 hectares, or just over 7,600 acres. And you can see with this map the array of red dots across the map that depict where our various nature reserves are located. So you can see there are some properties up to the north around Manitoulin Island and stretch out far into the east of the province. And then our most southern property, the Stone Road Alvar Nature Reserve, can be found down on Pelee Island to the far south. So just a closer look at Stone Road Alvar Nature Reserve. So it's a fun excursion to make it out to the island. You have to take a ferry to access Pelee, and it's a really fun adventure, even in itself, just getting to the island. Once you arrive on the island, the Stone Road Alvar Nature Reserve is located in the southeast corner, and the property itself is 42 hectares in size and is very unique in that it's home to 44 provincially rare and 33 regionally rare plant species. It also provides habitat for several at-risk species, including snakes, plants, and invertebrates. And it supports a number of unique plant communities, such as the chinkapin oak and nodding wild onion alvar, and which are found nowhere else in Ontario. So really a special place. And in 1981, the Stone Road Alvar complex, which includes the Ontario Nature Property, was declared an area of natural and scientific interest, or an ANSI, by the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources, and was recognized in this process as one of the most significant environmentally sensitive areas within the Essex region. So that's a little bit of background to the nature reserve. I wanted to backtrack a bit to talk about what alvars actually are. We biologists often use these terms without really fully explaining what they are. So I thought we could all get on the same page and just talk a little bit about what alvars are and what makes them so unique. So alvars are naturally open areas with either a very thin soil profile or no soil at all. And this is occurring over limestone, dolostone, or marble bedrock. And trees are either absent from these areas, or if they're present, they're not forming a continuous canopy. And the open areas and the types of disturbances that occur in these areas lead to the presence of very distinct flora and fauna associations that are adapted to withstand these extreme environmental conditions. Some examples of disturbances that occur within alvars and maintain these systems include flooding, drought, fire, and in some cases grazing as well. And these disturbances prevent woody species from invading alvar openings and promote high species diversity. So you can, within sort of the alvar classification, you can have both treed and open or non-treed alvars. And alvars are kind of further divided into 4 main subclasses. So you can have pavement alvars, grassland, shrubland, or savannah. And alvars are globally rare ecosystems. If we look at a map to put this in the Canadian context, this map is showing the locations of alvars and limestone barrens in Canada. You can see that they are very rare, although we in Ontario do have a concentration of alvars, which lucky us. Looking closer at Ontario, these highlighted areas with the black outlines show where these key regions are in southern Ontario. So of course we have alvars up on Manitoulin Island and within the Bruce Peninsula, and some of you would have likely heard about the Ontario Nature Properties that host alvars along the Bruce Peninsula in Samara's earlier presentation. Then we have the well-known Carden Plains, which are visited by and celebrated by birders, as well as the Napanee and Kingston Plains. Just to give you, and of course there are other regions across Ontario that support alvars as depicted in this map. And we're really focusing in, although not shown here, on the alvars that occur on Pelee Island. So when we send staff out to our nature reserves, one of the things that they're doing on the ground is classifying the plant communities that are found within each property and completing these ecological land classification maps. So what I want to highlight here is that the communities found on Stone Road Alvar consist mainly of woodlands and savannas, as well as shrub thickets. We do see small patches of tree and shrub alvars, as well as open alvars with exposed limestone. So these shrub alvars and open alvars are identified by the orange color here, as well as the light and dark blue and the light green colors. So these alvar pockets within the property have been what our focus has been in the prescribed burn work and the monitoring that we've done surrounding that. And I mentioned earlier that the Ontario Nature Stone Road property is part of a larger complex. In this map, you can see Ontario Nature's property outlined in yellow, but the larger Stone Road Alvar complex that is identified as an ANSI is owned by, there are pockets that are also owned by other conservation partners. So we have outlined in green property owned by the Nature Conservancy of Canada, and shaded in orange property that's owned by the Essex Region Conservation Authority. And I want to highlight this because all three conservation organizations work very collaboratively to make sure that the work that we're doing on the ground is very coordinated to achieve common conservation goals. And for each nature reserve, we develop a detailed management plan. And this is really key. The management plans help to address Ontario Nature's goals for the Nature Reserve program. These 4 goals are to safeguard habitat for rare and at-risk species, to protect biological diversity, establish benchmarks for scientific research, and create opportunities for recreation, education, and nature appreciation. These management plans that are developed for each nature reserve help us to focus our stewardship goals and actions, and then create a timeline around those, as well as assessing funding priorities and being targeted in those efforts. So what we know about Stone Road Alvar and the alvars that are found, the alvar communities found within that property, is that fire plays a very important role in maintaining the grassland alvar communities found there, and that this type of natural disturbance is really needed in order to decrease the abundance of woody shrubs and increase the abundance of native alvar species. And what we've been seeing with the removal of fire from these systems is over time the encroachment of shrubs such as prickly ash and staghorn sumac. And that's what this picture, the picture in this slide, is showing. And we have historically completed burns at Stone Road Alvar. The last burn was completed in 1999, and these are photos from that burn. The earliest burn was conducted in 1993. Just to give you some historical context for what we've done in the past regarding prescribed burns, and these efforts have taken place on Ontario Nature property as well as on the adjacent conservation land. So with the work that we've undertaken in the last 3 years related to our most recent prescribed burn, the broad objective of this project is to conduct the prescribed burn on Stone Road Alvar and then determine how effective this stewardship action is at maintaining habitat for key species at risk. So we focused the burn on 2 grassland alvars found within Ontario Nature's Stone Road Alvar property. So that the map to your right is showing those 2 grassland alvars as depicted in the green color. And the burn area of those alvars is approximately 9 hectares or 22 acres. So looking more specifically at some of our additional project objectives, in evaluating the effectiveness, we wanted to do monitoring both before the burn and after the burn, and look at rare and at-risk species in their habitats. Our monitoring efforts have focused on a wide variety of taxa, including plants such as blue ash, climbing prairie rose, common hop tree, and dwarf hackberry. Invertebrates, which include at-risk bees such as the gypsy cuckoo, rusty patch, and yellow-banded bumblebees, the broad-banded forest snail, and monarch butterflies. We've also been monitoring snakes such as the blue racer and eastern fox snake, lichens, birds, small mammals, and gray fox. So a very extensive list of taxa, and it's been really fascinating to get to know the property at this level of detail over the last 3 years. Of course, this much monitoring effort is not something that Ontario Nature staff could undertake on our own. And so this project has been hugely collaborative in terms of involving outside research partners, which include Natural Resources Solutions Incorporated, University of Toronto, University of Rennes, which is in France, and the Canadian Museum of Nature, as well as Trent University. And I wanted to just show a brief video of the broad-banded forest snail, which is one of the species at risk that we've been looking at a little bit more closely on Stone Road. So this is the researcher from France that makes a trip out to Pelee Island once or sometimes twice a year. And she's been tagging, using bee tags, the broad-banded forest snail and looking at movement patterns. This is just a very quick clip. And I was mentioning to Justin earlier on when we, before we got started, that there have been some interesting synergies between the various research and monitoring that's happened. So the folks at the University of Toronto that have been studying bees actually found a species of bee that nests in empty snail shells on Stone Road. And so that's just a neat kind of synergy that we've been finding or complement between the various research projects. So just digging a little bit more deeply into some of the monitoring efforts that Ontario Nature staff have been involved in, I just wanted to focus on the monarch butterfly and some of the work we've been doing on that species. So monarchs are listed as special concern provincially and endangered federally. And what we know about this species is that they are very dependent on their host milkweed plants within their breeding range for reproduction. There was some research done by Baum and Sharber, which showed that summer prescribed fire generated regrowth of milkweed plants during a time when they would normally be senescing, and that the regrowth of these new tender leaves were preferred by ovipositing monarch butterflies. These are the types of questions that we're trying to get at in terms of understanding how the burn affects different plant species and in turn their associated insect communities through prescribed fire. So what the graph on the on the right is showing from this study done on green milkweed with monarch butterflies that the density of green milkweed plants increased in sites that were burned. So that's the burn sites are the shaded bars in gray as compared to the density of milkweed plants in plots that weren't burned, which are the white bars. You can see that the density of milkweed plants was noticeably higher in plots that were burned. So what Ontario Nature staff have been doing to try to collect similar data to this study is by going out and following the monarch larva monitoring protocol. We are mapping milkweed patches in the burn area as well as sites outside of the burn area. So those areas that didn't receive the prescribed burn that act as control sites. So we map these milkweed patches and take GPS points for the grouping of plants that we find, record plant density or the number of plants. And then on each plant, we survey for monarch larvae and collect additional data on the number of larvae or eggs that we find on individual plants. And all the, in addition, the data that's collected goes towards our management efforts on the Stone Road Alvar Nature Reserve, but we also submit these findings to Mission Monarch and Milkweed Watch, which contribute more broadly to monarch conservation outside of our nature reserve. So we have identified 4 different species of milkweed on Stone Road Alvar, including common milkweed, butterfly milkweed, purple milkweed, and world milkweed. And here are just a couple photos of the types of things we encounter through these larva surveys. So we have the photo on the left is showing a 4th instar monarch butterfly larva feeding on world milkweed. And the photo on the right is showing a 2nd instar monarch butterfly larva feeding on common milkweed. And again, all this data is recorded, as I mentioned earlier. We also host a number of community outreach events that allow us to collect data on adult monarch butterflies. And it also allows us to expand our species list for other butterflies found within the property. So you can see the photo of the banded hair streak there in the top right. And these outreach events have also been a great way to engage the community in sharing with them more information about our research efforts in the prescribed burn. This prescribed burn was completed in September of 2019, and we worked with Lands and Forest Consulting to complete this burn. They're really wonderful to work with and have lots of experience completing burns across Ontario. So I just wanted to share some photos of that event. In addition, I mean, it's just such a massive collaborative effort to make this work happen on the ground between conservation partners, but also with the township of Pelee in terms of alerting road closures and alerting the residents and visitors to the fact that the burn is happening and awareness around that. And an article was published on the prescribed burn that in the winter 2019 issue. So if you're interested in reading more about the burn and seeing some more photographs, you can check out that article online through our website. So here are some before and after photos. We, even despite COVID, we're still able to conduct some post-burn monitoring in 2020. So we have 2 years of pre-burn data and 1 year of post-burn data that's been collected. In 2020, we focused our efforts on species at risk, snakes in their habitat, bumblebees, star plants, and butterflies. And I mentioned a couple of times now the collaborative nature of this project, and that's one of the things that excites me the most, to see so many people working together on the ground. So our conservation partners include the Nature Conservancy of Canada, as well as Essex Region Conservation Authority and the Essex County Field Naturalists. And our research partners include Natural Resources Solutions, University of Toronto, University of Rennes, and the Canadian Museum of Nature. Of course, Lands and Forests completed the burn, and the township of Pelee has been really instrumental in terms of helping to facilitate logistics. So what's next? This presentation is really just giving you a very high-level overview of the project. We have a research event coming up in early 2021 to showcase project findings. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the results that have come out of this project, I would encourage you to keep an eye on our events page to see when that online event is coming up. And then with the work that's happened over the last 3 years, that will be wrapping up, but we have received funding to continue monitoring on Stone Road Alvar for 2 more field seasons. It will be slightly more pared down compared to our efforts over the last 3 years, but we will be still looking at small mammals, snakes, including road mortality surveys, and also hosting a number of community outreach events. And that concludes my presentation on the Stone Road Alvar prescribed burn project. And now I wanted to, I have this short Pelee Island, what I'm calling the insider quiz. So bear with me, this is my first time doing the polls, so I think this should work out. I have a question on each slide, and the polls will, I'll prompt you with the polls to fill out a multiple choice answer for each question. So I first just wanted to get a sense of how many people on the call have actually visited Pelee Island before. So you should see the poll come up with yes, no answer. Okay, I can see the responses coming in, so it's working, which is good. Okay, and I'll give you about 10 seconds for to answer the question before I close it. Okay, so I saw that 64% of people have not visited Pelee Island before, and 36 said they have. So hopefully this presentation inspires the people who haven't visited the island to go and check it out. It really is a special place. And for those of you who there are some questions in this insider quiz that are more identification based, but some really are insider questions. So for those who have visited before, hopefully this really tests your insider knowledge. Okay, so the next question. Let's see here. So starting off with reptiles and amphibians. So which of these Ontario reptiles and amphibians are only found on Pelee Island? So you can see the 5 different species. So if you want to select from the poll which one is the ones that are only found on Pelee Island. I'll just give everyone a couple more seconds before I close the poll. Okay, so the species that are shown here in the photograph, so at A, you have eastern fox snake, B is a blue racer, C is a decayed brown snake, D is a blue spotted salamander, and E is a smallmouth salamander. So it looks like most of you, 37% of you said that blue racer was only found on Pelee Island, which is correct. And the second species that's only found on Pelee Island is E, the smallmouth salamander. So these two species have a very limited or restricted range and are only found on Pelee Island. Eastern fox snake, decayed brown snake, and the blue spotted salamander are found on Pelee Island, but also on the mainland. Okay. Next question. Okay, so pictured here, what species is this? It's a bulky warbler that can be seen skulking in the low brush at Stone Road Alvar. So I've posted the poll. It'll get you all to weigh in on what species is pictured here. It's really fun to watch real time what everyone's answers are. I'll just give you a couple more seconds before I close the poll. Okay, so 76% of respondents said yellow-breasted chat, which is correct. So some ID features for the yellow-breasted chat are that very striking large yellow breast. It also has a gray face with white spectacles and white mustache stripe. And another ID feature that's kind of difficult to see in this photo is the long tail, the yellow-breasted chat. So good job. Lots of birders in the crowd. Okay, so the next question. So this question, there's a little bit of a backstory to it and a bit of explanation. So I'll just read the question and then give you the backstory. So some of you might be familiar with the annual spring song event, which runs every year on the island in May. And as part of this event, there is the 24-hour bird race, which is a green bird race for the coveted Botham Cup to try to see as many bird species within the 24-hour time period. What makes it a green race is that birders can only participate by bicycle or walking. So this photo here is actually Ontario Nature's Director of Conservation and Education, Anne Bell, receiving this coveted Botham Cup when her team won in 2019. And she's receiving it from the guest literary speaker that year, Steve Burrows. And as a side note, she tells me that he has a series of birder murder mysteries, which are a fantastic read. So that's on my reading list for the future. But so it's a birding event, but it is paired with a number of Canadian authors. So this question is the annual spring song event is hosted by which Canadian celebrity author? So I'll just open up the polls. Give everyone just a few more seconds to respond. Seems like most people have a clear answer in mind for this question. So overwhelmingly, 84% said that the host is Margaret Atwood, which is correct. And so Margaret Atwood is a huge supporter of the conservation efforts underway on Pelee Island, and that is the correct answer. She does host the annual Spring Song event, the banquet part of the Spring Song event each year. Next question. So what characteristics are not helpful in identifying blue ash? And this is a species that is found on Stone Road Alvar. We'll just give everyone a few more seconds. Okay, so this was a bit of a tricky question. The four answers were the twigs have 4 ridges or wings, making them 4-sided, and that is in fact one characteristic that is helpful in identifying blue ash. Distribution is another one, which is the second answer. The leaves appearing blue in color is not a helpful characteristic for identifying blue ash. But that last characteristic, so the bark, is one that can be helpful in identification. The next question is a close neighbor to Stone Road Alvar Nature Reserve is known as PIBO. What does PIBO stand for? Just a couple more seconds. So 67% of participants said that it stands for Pelee Island Bird Observatory, which is correct. And a little bit about PIBO. They are a not-for-profit and have been a member of the Canadian Migration Monitoring Network since 2005. So this photo here is actually of their small banding lab. They also have a station that's just off Stone Road, just to the south of our nature reserve. And certainly if you're there during migration, it's worth stopping by their banding operation and seeing what birds are coming through. Okay, and I just have one more question as part of the insider quiz. And that's what conservation groups are currently conducting research and stewardship on Pelee Island? just give a couple more seconds for this question. Although I think everyone is almost unanimous in their answer. Okay, so 90% said all of the above, which is the correct answer. So Ontario Nature, as well as the Nature Conservancy of Canada, Essex Region Conservation Authority, and Ontario Parks were all doing research and stewardship on Pelee Island. Of course, this list is by no means extensive, but I just wanted to highlight some of the organizations involved in these types of efforts. And that concludes the Pelee Island Insider Quiz. So I hope you learned a thing or two about what's happening on the island, and it inspires you to take a trip. And I wanted to just end my presentation by thanking our funders for their very generous support of the work we've been doing on Stone Road. So a big thank you to them. We absolutely couldn't do this project without their support. That includes the Peacock Foundation, TD Friends of the Environment Foundation, the Ontario Government, and Environment and Climate Change Canada. And thanks very much to everyone for listening. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to share a little bit about this project with you, and happy to take any questions you have.
Great, thank you very much, Emma. Very, very interesting presentation, and certainly gives us all the feeling or the desire to go and visit Pelee Island at some point. We do have a number of questions here, and if you don't mind, I'll relay them to you here. I have a question from Heather, who is actually located near Cont Alvar, because you were talking about Alvars, and yeah. I guess the question really is asking about the if there's really an official designation to Alvar, Alvar habitats that provides funding from any organization for assessments. Heather, being near Cont Alvar, is wondering, because they have an Alvar at the north end of their land, and whether is there an organization that looks after Alvar specifically, or is there special status given to Alvars?
In terms of funding, I'm not aware of specific funding sort of targeted towards Alvars. Our project, in the funding that we sought, was related to the specific species at risk. And so she was specifically looking at a funding related. Can't quite see her.
Yeah, is there basically funding available for assessments or designation? So
yeah, I mean, if she, that's a more, so I don't know of anything specifically related to Alvars, but if she wanted to follow up with me, I could certainly point her in the right direction in terms of where we went to acquire funding to pursue the work that we did on Stone Road. But nothing that comes to mind specifically related to Alvars offhand.
All right. Is it okay if we share your email address then afterwards, Emma?
Yeah, that's fine.
Right. So maybe if Heather wants to reach out to you, that would be great. Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, on the topic of Alvars, David is asking, is there a size requirement for an area to be considered an Alvar? So I'm thinking a minimum size requirement.
Not that I'm aware of. I think, I mean, sometimes you can have smaller Alvar pockets within a larger complex. That's a great question, and I don't know what, just offhand, if there are any size requirements in order for it to meet the Alvar classification, but it's a great question. There are some great resources. I know when Ontario Nature was under Federation of Ontario Naturalists, there's a fantastic Alvars of Ontario publication that would probably be a good source for those sorts of details. and looking more specifically at classification. And then the Great Lakes Alvar initiative, there are some also fantastic reports that were put together by that group of people involved in the initiative. So those are two great resources for people who are looking to find out more about Alvar classifications and those types of things.
Maybe I can get the name from you, the name of that publication from you. We can also send that out to everyone if they want to find it in their library or somewhere in the vaults, somewhere. That'll be great. Another question here from Andres is asking, how do I find a blue racer? And I think I know the answer is you have to go to Pelee Island and look closely, but
yes, Pelee Island is the place to see blue racers. And I mean, they're very fast. So, and something to watch out for is the melanistic garter snakes that can sometimes be confused for a blue racer. But I mean, really, the way to see blue racers is to visit the island.
Great. I have a question here from Joan, who is asking, how much of Stone Road Alvar is accessible by trail?
So we do have a trail that will take you through a small section of the property. It's not a lengthy trail, but when it's accessed off of Stone Road, and there's a sign at the entrance to both ends of the trail. It's relatively short, but takes you through the shrub alvar portion of the property, as well as through, there's some chinkapin oaks right at the entrance to the trail. So it does highlight a number of the unique habitats found on the property so that people get a feel for the diversity of species found there.
Excellent. I have a question about prescribed burns from Peg. Peg is asking, how do you go about burning 22 acres and keep it under control? And once all the smoldering stops, does that mean it's safe for you or for the burn crew to leave? And is the burn done on a consistent date? That's actually 3 questions.
Okay. So, I mean, Lands and Forest Consulting were our burn professionals on the project. So we monitor the weather very closely leading up to the burn. We want to make sure that it hasn't been raining extensively, because you need your fuel load to actually ignite. The burn crew also goes out to the field site before the burn occurs, and actually, I mean, weeks leading up to the burn, and create a burn boundary so that the fire is contained only within the area that you want to burn. And I mean, it's a big crew of people that are out on the ground when this is actually happening. So they have walkie-talkies and are communicating with one another. They have a lot of weather equipment that's set up. So they're monitoring wind speed and just really keeping a close eye on controlling things on the ground. And then to your question about smoldering, you know, that's typically the burn crew sticks around until the following day, just for that reason, because and they will survey the burn area and make sure that those smoldering sites are out and are not going to ignite again. So there's a huge effort with the burn crew in terms of really monitoring things on the ground. And yeah, it was a really interesting experience for me to actually see it all unfold after many years of planning at a desk, to actually see it all unfold on the ground. And Lands and Forests were fantastic to work with.
Great. There's actually a few other questions relating to burns. One is, how expensive are prescribed burns? That's coming from Derek.
It depends on the size of the burn, and that would perhaps be a follow-up question, if you're looking at wanting to complete a prescribed burn on your conservation land, that would be a question for lands and forests, because the size of the area and the intensity of the burn and the frequency that you want to be burning all kind of factor into the cost.
All right. Another question here, was the burn from Karen, was the burn done in strips or patches?
It was, they had a crew of people that at different places within the burn area that were igniting, from one edge to another and kind of letting the fire spread naturally right into the center of the burn area. Our staff weren't actually in the thick of it while the ignition was actually taking place. We were, but so in patches, I guess, to answer your question.
Great. I have a couple of other questions that are related. One is from Judy and one is from Ruli. And they're asking, when a burn is done in summer, what happens to the snakes and snails, et cetera? So anything living on the ground, and are any of the animals destroyed during the burns, and how is that being monitored and assessed?
So this is a great question, and it's something we talked a lot about in the planning of this particular burn. So the challenges, burning in the summer is very challenging for all the reasons that are highlighted. It's a very active season for a number of species, and the last thing that we want to do is have a burn during that time, which could impact the species using that habitat. So we decided in our discussions about timing to focus on a fall burn, which sort of addresses that active season concern. And the spring we decided against only because it is so wet. And so we wouldn't be able to have the intensity of heat that we were after during that time of the year. Fall is also tricky for the same reasons, because fall, we see a lot of rain. So timing was really critical in terms of watching the weather. And we did go out to our site prior to conducting the burn and removed any field equipment that was there. So the bee traps that we have installed for doing bee monitoring, all of those things were taken down to ensure that they weren't attracting animals to them, which would then and also to ensure that the equipment wasn't getting damaged. So we chose the fall to minimize any disturbance to animals at the site during the burn, as opposed to a summer burn.
Okay. I have a sort of a follow-up question from Chris. Chris is asking, when the 2020 biodiversity, or were the 2020 biodiversity findings after the 2019 burn encouraging?
We are still compiling all the data that was collected over the past field season. So the research event that I mentioned earlier that will be happening early 2021 will highlight some of those findings. Unfortunately, I don't have anything to share from 2020 at this time, but I do look forward in that to sharing those details in our upcoming event.
Great. Just a follow up to Joan's question about the trail and how much of the reserve is accessible by trail. Smara Sukumar, who's the Nature Reserves Manager at Ontario Nature, has just answered that the trail is 345 meters in length. So just for anyone planning a trek in the Stone Road Alvar, it sounds very doable. I have another question here. Is it possible to volunteer for any of the wildlife surveys like the reptile surveys, and how does one go about that?
We have had volunteers involved in the project. So if anyone is interested in getting involved in that capacity, they can reach out and we can coordinate to try to see how we can make that work and where there are opportunities to get involved.
Okay, is there a contact? Are you the contact then for that, or?
Yeah, they can contact me.
All right, so we'll hook you up. That's great. Thanks very much. Question here. I'm not sure how you feel about answering this. Do alvars contribute to good wine grape growth?
I have no idea, but there is good wine on Pelee Island, so that's you should the next time you visit the winery, you should ask folks there.
I bet I know their answer will be. All right, I have a little aside here. Theodora is saying, by the way, that today's Margaret Atwood's birthday. I did not know that.
I did not know that either. Happy birthday, Margaret Atwood.
There we go. How do we time this perfectly, right?
Yeah.
Let me see here. Other questions here. We have, does climate change affect alvars? Dick is asking that question.
Because alvars are, I mean, looking at the disturbance, the element of disturbance and how that plays a really critical role in maintaining alvar habitats, I would say that climate change is absolutely going to have an impact on alvars. Exactly in what way, it's hard to say, but any changes to rainfall in the spring or fall and those flooding events, or changes to summer temperatures in terms of those extreme droughts is certainly going to affect the flora and fauna that are found within these habitats. So absolutely.
Interesting. I have another question here from Derek is asking, how do you balance the goal of protecting species at risk and the goal of recreation and education for humans in the Ontario Nature Reserves?
That's a great question. I think when we are looking at trail networks within our properties and really, trying to encourage recreation and people to get outdoors and really experience nature for themselves, so when we're designing those trails, we are keeping in mind where there are sensitive species and trying to keep people out of those areas, while at the same time building trails that give people an experience of the diversity that's within each nature reserve. As I think, how we try to balance things in terms of promoting recreation while also giving at-risk species those, well, not increasing sort of unnecessary pressure on those species.
I have a question here from Ali. Ali is asking, are there any records of natural fires that happened in alvars? Maybe in this one or any others that you're aware of?
I think there are along the Bruce Peninsula. I'm not aware of the history of natural fires specifically for Stone Road, but I know from some of our colleagues doing work on the Bruce Peninsula, there definitely are, and like the role that lightning plays, for example, in starting fires and creating those open habitats. Yeah, so certainly there are historical records, but it is a bit of a challenge to find those historical records. And it's interesting. I had mentioned that grazing is also a disturbance, and there are some interesting historical records in different areas associated with grazing animals maintaining these open alvars, which is quite interesting as well.
Interesting. I have another question here. I'm not sure if how you feel about this one. Do home-raised monarch butterflies migrate south? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, I think
Just have
so.
an internal sort of compass, and they know when to
Yeah.
go and go. As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. No, that's my understanding as well.
And one more question here. With the birding, Oh wait, let me see this. With the burning, understanding that it is a balance of interests that are involved when you're scheduling a burn, planning a burn. How does it impact landowners and residents in the area with respect to smoke and any other sort of disturbance? How do you negotiate that with local residents? I mean, I know you showed the signs of, warnings that there was a burn taking place, but how do residents respond to that?
So we, in addition to putting up the sign the day before and the day of, we're also in touch with all landowners in the immediate vicinity of Stone Road and hand-delivered letters letting them know about the planned burn. We're in a fortunate position that because we're surrounded by conservation lands, there aren't a lot of homes that are very close to the property. And so the concern around smoke wasn't too much of an issue. And we received a lot of support from landowners in terms of implementing the burn. We didn't have anyone that wasn't in support of the project, and but initiating those lines of communication very early on and being transparent in the work that was happening and giving people an opportunity to get in touch with us was really key in making the project happen. Excellent.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of our questions here. We do have some nice comments thanking you, and I would like to thank you on behalf of all of us in attendance here very much for that informative presentation. And once again, it does make us want to go. And I know some of our travelers are looking forward to getting there in May and checking out the Stone Road Alvar Nature Reserve. So thank you very much, Emma, for that. And just a quick reminder to those in attendance that, of course, this presentation was recorded. So we will be sending everyone a recording link, and you can watch this presentation again and forward it to anyone else who might be interested in Ontario Nature's work, and specifically in their work on Pelee Island. And we'll also forward a way to contact Emma if you have any specific follow-ups that you'd like to do with her with regards to the Ontario Nature's work. So thank you very much, Emma.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all, and please stay well, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.